Mr. Patti,
Yeah.
specifically coming to your experience of building townships, and that was fulfilling a social cause in many respects. But even through that initiative, I believe you had involved tribal women. Can you share that experience with us and how that really impacted a diversity initiative impacted a village or a township at the ground level? What impact does this have?
I'll come to that, but before that I would just like to give you a different perception, because I am the only person from the public sector here on the panel, and I come from a core manufacturing sector.
Yes.
So, we have certain inbuilt advantages or disadvantages as it may be perceived. But fact is that if I talk about gender diversity, yeah, as Chris has told, I think in the manufacturing sector in which we are, hardly 5 to 10% are women. So, that leaves a big vacuum in the sense that a big pool of talent out there we are not able to tap. Right? They must be better or equally talented people. So, we are not able to tap. Now, certain disadvantages that the manufacturing sector suffers from. I mean, if you see the Factories Act or the ID Act, it talks about workmen, it talks about worker. It does not talk about a workwoman or a working girl or working lady, it does not talk about that. And it sets apart a time limit within which a lady can work in a factory, right. From 7 p.m. to 6 a.m., you can't engage a lady, whether she is an officer or a worker, it does not make any difference. She can't be made to work. So, there is a gender bias in the
inbuilt into the
laws, which has to be done away with. Thankfully, the IT sector is out of it. So, they have been able to really tap that talent, but we are having a disadvantage. We have got hardly 5 to 6% women, and most of them are working as teachers or they are working as the nursing staff, or which are mostly considered to be feminine. I mean, it's still a very rustic way of looking at things, very primitive way of looking.
Yes.
Secondly, coming to the regional context, which Chris was also mentioning about. I mean, earlier we had this system of compulsory notification of vacancies act. Supposing I am to recruit somebody for a Rourkela steel plant, I have to notify the nearest employment exchange. So, we used to get the local talent, whatever is available. That was maybe suiting certain types of jobs or jobs which were operating at a particular technology at that point of time. But right now, since the early part of this century, all the public sectors, central public sectors, they are to recruit through all India competition. So, I tell you, we are now getting the best talent from all over the country, and public sector thankfully still remains as one of the prime employment generators, as well as they are considered to be prime employers.
Correct.
Even people somehow have a tendency that security of job is there, good township is there, as you are telling. So, they come over. So, we are getting, I tell you, wonderful talent, and in a HR profession right now, we are now focusing on individuals. Every individual has become very important, I think, which you must be doing in your own area. So, the HR challenge is to make every individual as productive as possible, to enhance the productivity. Earlier, we started engaging ourselves in weeding out the deadwood, then we went to improving productivity of the people, and now we are into training and multi-skilling and trying to increase their productivity as far as possible. So, this is helping us a big way. Now, coming to another factor which you have not listed in the diversities, as Aniruddha was mentioning, is the age. Age diversity, I tell you, is one of the greatest challenges for the HR professional today, especially a company like mine, where we have got people in the higher age group and we have got people in the lower age group. There is a tremendous diverse way of looking at things. The young man, he is more qualified, he is much more knowledgeable, he picks up the job very fast, The technology available today is much more suited to his qualification, to his way of thinking, and the older man, he doesn't fit it to this technology, I mean to the way the things are, and taste is completely different. So, one of our major challenges on the shop floor today is to manage this workforce. How to, because there is always a conflict. Now, you can't have all young people together, because we tried that experiment. We had all the young people in a particular department, and what happened was when the marriage season came, all of them vanished. All of them vanished. आज इसका शादी है, सब बारात में चलेंगे. कल उसका शादी है, सब बारात में. It was hell of a job. And being a manufacturing sector, continuous operation, you can't have this type of running away from duty. So, I mean, there has to be a balance. I think you have put it out somewhere, that balancing diversity, that's very important. That's the HR challenge today. So, and as regards the question which you are posing with regard to the CSR, I mean, how to bring about, I tell you, steel plants were set up in very, very remote places and mostly tribal areas. And it is because, as Jawaharlal Nehru told, that these are modern temples, I mean temples of modern India. And I tell you, it's a fact, because by these plants coming up, I mean, we have been able to develop not only the connectivity, not only the income, not only employment, the outlook, education level, our hospitals, our schools. I mean, we spend lavishly on education, educating especially the girl child. Our ratio in of boy to girl is 1:1, and there is no dropout. And we cover all the tribal villages in the vicinity, up to 20 kilometers of the township. We cover everybody. We have tagged up with Akshay Patra, and we are providing free midday meals to all the hot midday meals are being served to more than 73,000 children every day. 73,000 children. So, I mean, a lot of CSR activities.
So great. The public sector obviously fulfills a much larger social responsibility compared to the private sector, and that's one. But they're also challenged in many ways, given some of the laws and restrictions that you've highlighted for us. Sandeep, let me come to you. I'm also aware that you need to leave shortly. This section that, we conclude section 1, which is really about, we've kind of built the case for diversity, but also highlighted the challenges and the realities of business. So whether it was customer diversity or employee diversity or leadership diversity or even supplier diversity, these are all aspects that fulfill some business, some part of the business agenda, but there are many other so-called criteria to be evaluated as you go down this path of execution. So let me get down to programmatic interventions. When in our companies, we all have a diversity agenda. There's some program that is managing this diversity agenda. Let's talk about recruitment. In your experience, how has recruitment fulfilled the diversity agenda of an organization? What do they do differently? When an organization has a diversity agenda, what is the recruitment department doing differently than one that does not have a diversity agenda?
First of all, I don't think it's an agenda of one department. It has to be collectively owned by the entire organization. A recruitment department or staffing organization, I mean,
do they play a role?
They don't exist.
Do they play a role?
Well, they do play a role, because they will execute.
The objective is to bring in more women into the workforce,
they will
execute, more diverse.
They will execute that strategy. But the most important piece is going to be here, apart from the guys who are going to be recruiting, which is the HR folks, the guys who are going to be the line managers, you need to select those people who actually have the right mindset to work on this agenda. Because you don't have the line manager who believes in it, then the recruitment, the staffing organization, the HR organization can do nothing about it. And I think we need to move those people out of those jobs. The first job the HR has to do is to ensure, pick up those guys who are a hindrance to that agenda and move them out of the organization. If not the organization, at least move them out of the roles, which will at least make way for those people who will have this agenda. So I think that's number one. Second, as I mentioned, more tactically, for a certain period of time, you got to drive this with a lot of, I would say, passion, and almost like creating a policy around it, which is that if everything being equal, you're going to be looking at a women employee over a.
Is that the way it's communicated? Everything being equal,
everything,
hire the woman.
Absolutely, absolutely. And people have practiced that, in the organizations that I have worked for, and at least I can say even the current organization that I work in my own department, when I go out, everything being equal, I would look at a woman employee. It just happens that it's gone the other way around, wherein we need to now swing it back. But having said that, I think that's the role that HR needs to play. Ensure, first of all, that you build a mindset, and to build that mindset, you got to pick out those people who are an hindrance to it and move them out. And it's going to be a slow process. It's not going to happen overnight, because, again, whether we blame it to our social fabric, our education system, or whatever it may be, I think it's going to be a slow process. The thinking has to change, and it is changing. I think for sure it is changing. And I don't see any reason that this panel is going to be very different in the next 5 years.
See, the two critical conversations in an organization, and I'm purely looking at it from a gender standpoint, there obviously is much more to it. But the two critical conversations that I've seen when the rubber hits the road, one is a hiring decision. And often enough you've heard recruiters ask the question, when are you getting married? When do you think you're going to start a family? I don't know whether the audience agrees here, but I hear this often enough in the best of companies that exist in the country. So this isn't a statement for the few that are in the hinterlands of India. Two is a performance conversation. Now let's say a woman goes on maternity leave and missing for 6 months in the year. How does that impact? Are any prejudices built as you give a rating to that individual in that 1 year to say 6 months she wasn't here? How can she be a top rater? So these are some obvious realities, and I'm not sure, Krish, I want to get your perspective as a long-standing practitioner. Is this still a reality? Are we still challenged at the grassroots level with such basic realities?
Yeah, I think, let's look at it in perspective. Yeah? Has diversity improved in Indian organizations? Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, I think it has
absolutely
improved tremendously. I mean, I remember 25 years back, the number of women working in the company that I joined versus now, it's improved tremendously. Yeah, I think it's changing every day. And I think most companies have understood why the issues, what are the issues, and they're trying to really take steps there. So, is there a business benefit? They all understand there's a business benefit. But the business benefit is not there now. It's not an immediate business benefit, and that's the thing. So therefore, the hiring manager or the line manager does not see the immediate business benefit. And I think that's the role where the leaders and our HR policies have to bring in. How do you really trade off the short term versus the long term? Yeah, so that's the challenge for all of us, because they all know it's there, but in the time when you got to really take your short-term cause of hiring somebody and filling things, then you don't see that.
So other criticism, just keeping with short-term benefit and long-term benefit. When you take this decision of hiring a woman, even before you realize the benefit, the woman no longer exists in the workforce. That's the biggest criticism. That I want to bet on somebody who is a long-term player. You often hear this tom-tommed in organizations. Lambi race ke ghode pe lagao paise, right? So you want to invest in people that are going to remain with an organization for a longer period of time. Whether it's a decision to send somebody for a training program, or a exposure in a multinational country, or a complex project in a market that tremendously adds experience and exposure, or simply hiring a person between a male and a female. And now with the introduction of the Sexual Harassment Act, there is even a greater reluctance on part of men and I can say this, to hire women. Is that I'm bringing it all on the table.
No.
Now this might be conversations in the coffee room and may not be said publicly, but there are conversations taking place.
No, I don't. I think that's maybe a small
microcosm.
Microcosm. But if you really look at it, I think most organizations, if you go to the campus nowadays, 40% of the students at the campus are women. The companies, we're hiring almost 30 to 40% of our first-time hires are all women. Yeah. And are we really looking whether they're going to be staying next 20 years?
Nobody's looking at that.
They all understand that yes, we need to make them stay. There will be some people who may make choices, but we all have to work to make them stay. I think every company now goes out when they hire the campus. I don't think they're saying, okay, I'm not going to have women because they're not going to be staying. No, every company has them. And the point is, you hire them, you get them in. How do we really then start building, and there are
benefit realization.
The benefit realization and working and removing some of our inherent biases.
These biases exist. These are unsaid truths that continue to operate.
The fact is, again, taking the point that Krish was talking about, see, it is a universal issue, or I would say a point which is not limited to only women, which is that are they going to be staying long enough or not. I think when you go to the campus, you're also looking at that people that you're going to be hiring and you're investing so much of money, and your time, energy and all that, are these people going to be staying longer with you or not?
Yes.
Long enough with you or not? And irrespective of the gender, I don't think anybody, maybe people do, but I don't think progressive companies and progressive HR managers, maybe the answer lies in this point itself, are looking at gender differences and they're looking at people differently.
What about line managers? So this is not a conversation about HR. This is about every line manager has a view on what kind of an employee he or she wants to hire.
First of all,
he wants the person who performs best.
Yeah. Right, exactly.
He wants the person who performs. And there are women, and in fact there are many women who perform very well. So therefore, I think that's all they look at.
Therefore, there is a colored view, and I'm trying to table that men are willing to travel to hardship locations. Men are willing to work longer hours. There is no so-called restriction, or it won't be seen very differently if you ask that woman to work till 12 at night. These are all biases that are being deeply held within, and until and unless you don't unshackle them, they will continue to operate.
So let me add
yes,
to this.
yes, Samir, please.
I think we are looking at the whole diversity thing more like an event. To me, it's a journey, okay? And in a journey, I think you need to have a long-term perspective. When we started the whole diversity agenda, I think one of the biggest...
Can you hear Samir? Can you hear Samir?
One of the biggest investment we made was creating what I call as enabling culture. We set up a diversity council which was not part of HR. It was stewarded by HR. It was
sponsored by business.
And it has business unit president and HR director as executive sponsors. It had 50% women and 50% men. So by doing that one symbolic thing, and it's an advisory council of the management team, we set out a message against diversity for us is inclusiveness, is a holistic perspective of the issues.
I understand this. I'm talking about in your journey, what are the challenges?
So what happened is, I think is leadership buying that vision and communicating that vision repeatedly? That's one, which we are doing. Second is, are we sensitizing managers in terms of if there are differences, let's accept them. But there are also benefits to have that.
Correct.
It's a continuous dialogue, and the biases will come down. They may not go away totally, but they will be there. I think it's a process of engagement, what you have continuously, you keep on doing that. We came to a stage where our engagement scores, when I look at that, I ask for a gender cut. The way women respond to engagement questionnaire and where the men respond to, they're not different. The same.
What do you mean they are the same?
The issues, the way they view at it, various issues related to them, and they are working out there. There's no perceptible changes or no perceptible differences I see, be it manager, supervisory, focus, or be it work employment conditions, or be it any other dimensions of the engagement which get impacted. So what it hints to me in a journey is that definitely we were not an evolved organization. We were the same ecosystem where the rest of us are operating. We have the same reality outside of a social biases, which comes into the organization and start reflecting the reality outside. We worked with it in sensitizing the organization, continuous leadership, having it in the face, the messaging. We continue to deliver the message, it's meritocracy, because if we would have consciously focused on promote diversity agenda, somewhere we would have lost out on the meritocracy. So we continued focusing on meritocracy, but yes, each one of us carry the matrices and scorecards on which every month we look at. So it is not the numbers I hire, it's not the recruitment. So it's a framework which I say recruit, develop, then accelerate and retain. And this all encompassed into enabling culture and engaged organization. And engaged organization is all managers, everybody is aligned, they understand it.
It's an integral part of your talent management system.
Strategy, yeah. And we spend almost every quarter we spend a day, what we call it a people day, where we look at people talent across the organization. We dedicate a time separately on what we call is a diversity talent there. We look at the women talent separately, how they are doing, how they are performing, are we accelerating, are there choke points at certain levels in the organization, what we can do about it. And it is a continuous issue. Do I have people where they refuse to hire women because they suspect that she may go on a long maternity leave? Yes, I do have people in my organization.
Tell me,
but we need to confront them.
Ani, tell me, since nobody's answered my question directly on challenges.
Okay.
What are the challenges specific to implementing a diversity program, agenda, plan in an organization as you deal with these realities? And I'm sure these realities at some stage were in the West. But for the law that exists, equal opportunity, there you can get, there is clear criticism and consequences of these biases actually existing and playing out. Whereas in India, they aren't. I mean, you can still do what you please, is in the benefit of the business.
No, I'll tell you, it's a tough question, and I'm just trying to look at it from an employment life cycle perspective. So if I look at, let's say when you start recruiting employees from the campus, we go to all your IITs and your BITS Pilani, and absolutely, Krish, what you're saying before is if you look at it, most of these schools, top marks, they're definitely, women are there. So that's, the talent is available there, but when you go to the campuses, it's going to be how do you show that your organization is unique compared to everybody else, and this is why you want to work there. So I found that meritocracy obviously is what we need to go for. Everyone's looking for it, so we go to those schools. But to Sandeep's point, if you look in terms of the if you have all things being equal, we want to prefer to get a woman in the organization. We'd love to have that, but the challenge is going to be what is our I guess our value proposition to that young woman in engineering to say, hey, in my organization, this is the right company to go with. So we have to have a very compelling business case. And I'll give you one thing which sounds really basic. I mean, you go to the campus and a young female engineer goes there who is a graduate, alumni from that university. That has some power. But I'll tell you one thing which even works better. Our CEO is a woman. Our CEO was employee number 20 in Google. She is a hardcore techie, will outdo any guy for mathematical acumen. That's actually what happened. I went to I won't name the university. I went to the campus. There's one young, female engineer beside me, and she was like ready to basically sell the case. And you know what actually sold us? Oh, you know what? Your CEO is Marissa Mayer. Hey, I can be her one day. That's what kind of sold us. So the tough thing is not just in terms of getting to the campus. We happen to have a female CEO right now, but there's more than that. The once you actually get them to the organization is how do you create an inclusive environment and get rid of systemic barriers? And I'll give you an example, which sounds really simple, but I had one client, and it's not in this company, really good manager, hardcore techie kind of guy, and I looked at the numbers as an HR person does and say, you know what, the women in this team, there seems to be a very high percentage of women that are leaving. And no, I don't know why. And then I also look at other, ethnic groups are leaving as well, and I couldn't figure it out. So then we actually kind of started probing and asking questions, and then I said, so, how do you engage people? How do you work with them? And this manager, very sincere guy, saying, well, you know what? We have our quarterly budget, and, we go and we do something. What do you do? Well, we go play cricket in the afternoon, and then after we're done cricket, we have a couple of beers, and we have a couple more beers. Got it. So out of the people in your team, how many of the people actually attend? Probably about 80% of them. What's your percentage of women? And he said, roughly 15 to 20%, and other people. okay, why don't you try doing this? And they did some, hey, competing cooking teams where, one team's doing vegetarian, one's non-veg. Guess what? That event, we end up having 98% participation. Over 2 quarters time, the guy's attrition went up down from 30% annualized to like, I don't know, in the low teens, just by some simple stuff of him being aware. So a lot of these things are good managers who are not aware of the systemic barriers. And then the other thing is going to be in terms of promotion and visibility. If you look at a lot of the organizations that we work in, it's not always an efficiency game. I'm here at 8 o'clock at night, and Nishya and I happen to be shooting the breeze, and he's my boss. Guess what? If we're doing good work together, I'm probably going to get promoted. And some other woman who's working from home and probably working until midnight and doing better work, she won't get promoted. That's one of the problems I find as well.
Right.
So it's a great point. Thanks, Ani, for bringing that out, that we all inherently hold biases. And that's the assumptions and beliefs. Our own upbringing and experiences have led to these biases. Once we start challenging those biases and step back and reflect on whether those biases actually hold true, because ultimately we are assessing individuals and their uniqueness. The minute you start putting them into clusters or into groups and assume that everybody fits that bill, I believe you've already lost the opportunity of diversity to begin with. That's one. Two, there is also, I believe, in society an inherent dilemma that we are going through between chivalry and equality. And I want to share a small story here. I was on a game park drive in the wildlife in Africa, and we were going through this safari, and my safari guide was a male, and he was driving the jeep, and we were all sitting in the jeep, and as we were going through, there was a jeep broken down, and there were a set of people sitting in that jeep, and there was a woman who was driving that jeep. So I obviously asked my safari guide to say, shouldn't we stop and help? Because it's the car seems to be broken down, or if it's a flat or a tire, maybe we should extend a helping hand and help the other car. And he says, well, the last time I did that, I got a rude stare, and clearly wasn't taken very well, because it was assumed that she may need help, because she's a woman and a driver. Now somewhere I believe that this complexity is also in corporates, and it plays out differently. So if it's a very tough, hard, challenging assignment, sometimes you assume, I don't think it'll be right to send her away from her family for that assignment. You already assumed that without even checking for that, and actually the individual who would probably volunteer for that assignment feels, oh, I'm not good enough to get selected for this assignment. So these biases, I think, exist, and I'm not sure if there's any clear, simple answer to it. But these are realities that continue to play out. Is it equality or chivalry? Do you open the door? Don't you open the door? Do you let the person go first? And while these are small niceties, I think they play up at work as well. I think they play up at work as well.
You're absolutely right. I think we as managers end up having more dinner parties. I mean, I can give you my personal example. When I walked into this job and there was this culture of having dinner parties, and I started asking my team, like Sandeep's team I have a lot of diversity talent in my team, and I just asked them, why are you not coming up in the parties? Why don't you show up?
Evenings.
Yeah, and then they said, we got families. And it hit me. It says, I presumed. Throw a dinner party and I'll be doing nice team bonding. And we just changed the culture and said we start doing the lunches.
Friday afternoon.
Friday afternoon.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everybody's there.
Yeah.
And it's just that, and I think these are some of the biases, plus some of the opportunities they don't work towards diversity talent, networking. You and I can just walk across and have a beer in the cyber city or cyber hub. How many women don't have that opportunity, And I think right now in networking and executive sponsorship, which is a big thing we're talking about, in leadership positions, you need to have executive sponsorship. And when you don't network, you are not there in the face, then this whole issue comes up in how you're going to get sponsored out there. Do we have enough role models to talk about, from the women role models who can talk about in terms of their success stories? We don't have very many, we look at that. But we need to search for them and make sure as an organization we bring them in and have them exposed. from diversity.
I also believe that the phenomena of either or, male or female itself creates a conflict even before there is one. And one way of probably solving for it is when you add identifiers. For example, a woman who loves playing badminton, is a mother of two, and has interests in art. You've just, when you began the conversation, it was a woman and a man. When you added these identifiers, you actually limit the possibility of conflict, because there is now far greater acceptance vis-a-vis only limiting it to her being a woman or he being a man. I think, and that's about the individual and celebrating the individual rather than limiting it to these point identifiers that we always limit ourselves to in diversity.
But I think I would agree with Anirudh that what has happened is that our situation, I mean, he has compared with 20 years back what the situation was in the West. But I feel as things are developing, I am quite optimistic, very, very optimistic. As things are happening now, these girls are going to overtake the boys in no time.
Already, in some cases.
They are in no time. I think maybe hardly another 5 to 10 years, you will find altogether, I mean, we will be talking about diversity in the other sense. Okay.
5 to 10 years.
Yeah, 5 to 10 years. I have
couple of
seen
guys
it.
in their
I
minorities.
come from Orissa. I will tell you an example. I come from Orissa. In the 80s, there was hardly 1 or 2 girls in the engineering colleges.
Right.
We had very few engineering colleges. There were hardly 4 engineering colleges in the entire state, and there were hardly 3 to 4 girls in those colleges. Then somebody made a reservation of 40% seats. You have to have. I mean, in the early 90s, 40% seats were reserved for girls. And in Orissa, people were normally they are conservative. So they didn't believe in sending out their girls to engineering colleges. I mean, it took at least 4 to 5 years to break that mindset. And once they started getting in, and then this IT boom came, then these girls, they started traveling all over India, all over the world. Now, if you go to Orissa, from every household, you will find a girl somewhere out. I mean, I feel that things will change very
We are on a positive, strong footing. As Krish also said, while he ridiculed our state to begin with, abysmal state to begin with, but he also then said we had made tremendous.
But I think we got long way to
We had made tremendous progress, and I guess with the leadership on this table and outside, a lot more will happen.
A couple of points here. I just wanted to share 2 things. One, you mentioned that less number of women in engineering colleges, and that was a long time ago. My son is doing his engineering now, and he shares the same problem still around. So he's not very happy with the situation still. But having said that, I think we've got a great example sitting here right next to us. I think times have changed, and a lot of it also changes with time. There was a time when about 25, 30 years ago, when we used to watch Doordarshan news, and we've got a great example here. We had people like her, Rennie, and others, and it was supposed to be a female bastion. The news readers. And now you see, I think it's the entire thing has got changed. So it's for the other cause. What I'm saying, the point that I'm making is that with concerted effort, with the entire social fabric, the society changing and the needs changing and desires changing, I think we may have to continue doing that consciously, but it will happen over a period of time, and it's going to be sooner than later.
I want to add
You'll
one
see.
point, what Mr. Patti said about the reservation portion. It just made me think. I think we as corporates, we are doing quite a bit on that, and things have improved. But is the ecosystem in which we operate is improving? And I think somewhere we as corporate need to start impacting that. And and I think that will start changing quite a bit of the dilemma which we face, the challenges we face in terms of talent pipelines, in terms of certain biases. I can share with you some of my experiences, you know, as I told you, but we started practicing on the value chain. So in Coke, we started giving coolers, the solar coolers, you know. There are villages in North India, to begin with, we started there, where there's no electricity. So we started giving the solar coolers. It's from solar energy, the cooler is charged, to those retailers where owners are women. And we started about 3 years back. And I visited, you know, one of the first initial beneficiary of the scheme about 2 weeks back. And I was talking to her and trying to find out how it has changed her life. She started realizing the value of because she got gainfully employed and she was adding to the family income. Her status went up, her respect went up, and she's making sure her two daughters, she's got two daughters, they're getting the education. And she's got lofty dreams for them.
Cool. Great.
And I'm realizing is that I think, you know, if as organizations, as corporations, we start impacting some of these initiatives, and I know public sectors do quite a bit out there, and I think, and we as other corporations, I think we need to be, maybe for selfish motive, sustainability of my business, let it be then. Let's go and invest in those, I think, value chains. I think it will be changing the face and start alleviating some of those challenges which we experience in terms of getting people in.
Krish, closing thoughts?
Well, I think it's a big challenge. I think it starts, you know, I think lots of things are happening in the right direction. I think the biggest thing for us to really overcome is changing our biases. Yeah, I think how do we really do that? And it's not easy. And it comes in many forms and in many ways. And how do we really ensure that we really trade off the short term versus the long term? Yeah, therefore, there is a benefit in the longer term, and how do you ensure that the organization, you know, builds that? And that's where the role of leaders and all of us here is there. I think each of us can really make a difference in that. Yeah, I think it can be quite positive as we look forward.
Okay, that pretty much brings us to the end of our conversation and the start of our conversation with you.